What is a perception? Perception is a process by which we organize and interpret sensory impressions to give meaning to our environment. What we perceive can be substantially different from objective reality. For example, all employees in a firm may view it as a great place to work, favorable working condition, interesting job assignments, good pay, excellent benefits, understanding and responsibilities management. But as a most of us know, it's very unusual to find universal agreement across people. Why is perception important in the study of organizational behavior? It is important because people's behaviors is based on their perception of what reality is, not or unreality itself. The world as it is perceived is the world that is behaviorally important. In other words, our perception becomes the reality from which we act. To understand what all of us have in the common in our interpretations of reality, we need to begin with the factors that influence our perception. Factors that influence perception. Many factors shape of and sometimes distort the perception. These factors can be resides in the perceivers, in the object or the target being preserved, or the situation in which the perception is made. Perceivers, when you look at the target, your interpretation of what you see is influenced by your personal characteristics, attitude, personality, motivate, interest, past experience, and expectations. Hi everybody. Hi Brooknelizings. Hi. कैसे हैं आप सभी? How are you all people? Good morning. अभी तो गुड मॉर्निंग हुआ है. आप लोग बताओ कैसे हो आप सभी? Some perceptions created by attitude. Like these can be, uh, in some ways we hear that we want to hear, and we see what we want to see, not because it's the truth, but because more conscious and therefore as a higher performers. However, supervisors who were night owls themselves were less likely to make that erroneous assumptions. Some perceptions created by attitudes like these can be contracted by the objective evaluation, but other can be more insidious. Consider, for instance, observer perception of status. One said a police officer chased and shoot a filing man, and other said a handicapped man lying on the ground was shot. Neither perceived the situation correctly. The man was attempting to attack a police officer with the hammer when he was shot by the officer. Factors that influence perception. Factors in the perceivers. Attitudes, motivates, interest, experience, expectations. Factors in this situation. Time, work setting, social setting. Factors in the target. Noveling, motion, sound, size, background, proximity, similarity. Target. The characteristics of a target The characteristics of a target is the following by the people who don't want to judge a perception in the world. So we find that uh, target the characteristics of a target also affect what we preserve, because we don't look at the target in the isolation. The relationship of a target is to background influences perception, as does our tendency or to working close with and the similarly things together. We can perceive members of any group that has a clearly distinguishable characteristics as alike in other unrelated ways. These assumptions can be harmful as when People who have a criminal record are prejudiced in the workplace, even when it is known they were wrongly arrested. Sometimes difference can work in our favor through such as when we are drawn to target that are different from what we expect. For instance, uh, Past- participants in a recent study respected a professor wearing a t-shirt and sneakers in the classroom more than the same professor dressed traditionally. The professor stood out from the norm for the classroom setting and was therefore preserved as an individualist context. Context matter too. The time at which we see an objective or even can influence our attention, as can occasion lighter hit or situational factors. For instance, you may not notice someone dressed up for the formal event that you attended on the study night. If it you were known to notice that a person dressed the same way for your Monday morning management class, he or yes, he or she would likely catch your attention. If the students do not normally wear formal attire to the class, neither the principal nor the target has changed between the Saturday night and the Monday morning. But the situation is different. People are usually not aware of the factors that influence their view of a reality. In fact, people are not even that preservative about their own ability. Thankfully, awareness and objects measure can reduce our perception distortions. For instance, when the people are more aware of their own racial basis, they are more motivated to control their own prejudice and more attuned to preserving their own basis. Let's consider how we make perception of others. Hi everybody, कैसे हैं आप सभी? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Person perception, making judgments about others. The procession, the perception context most relevant to OB include person perception or the perception people from about each other. Many of other perception of other are this is a particularly troublesome but common but common formed but common. The perception concepts most of relevant to the OV include person perception or the perception people from about each other. Many of our perception of other are this is a regularly troublesome, but some when we infer another person's morality, research indicates we form our strongest impression based on what we perceive about others' moral character. But our initial information about this can be strictly and unfounded. Let's unravel some of our other human tendencies that interferes with a correct person perception beginning with the evidence behind evolution theory. Attribution theory. Non-living objects such as a desk, machines, buildings are subject to the law of a nature, but they have no belief, motivations, or interventions people do. When we observe people, we attempt to explain their behavior. Our perception and the judgment of a person's actions are influenced by the assumption we make about that the person's star of a mind. Attribution theory tries to explain the way we judge people differently depending on the meaning we attribute to the behavior. For instance, consider that you think with people smile at you. Do you think they are cooperative, exploitive, or comparative? We assign meaning to smile and other impression in many ways. Attribution theory also tries to explain that what we do as a result of our attributions. For example, recent research suggests that the supervisors are more likely to exploit or treat the subordinates poorly, making them work extra hours, giving them tedious tasks. If they judge them as a being passionate about their work, in other words, they think is okay if they may make them work harder if they see them as a passionate. Attribution theory suggests that when we observe in individual behavior, we attempt to determine whether it was internally or externally caused. That determination depends largely on three factors: distinctiveness, consciousness, and consistency. क्या क्या determination depends largely in three factors. The determination factors depend on three factors. What are the three factors? Mainly, first factor is known as the distinctiveness. First factor is known as the distinctiveness. Second factor is known as the consciousness. Third is the consistency. Let's clarify difference between internal and external causes, and other we will discuss determining factors. Internally, what happened? Caused behavior are those on an observer believed to be under the personal behavior control of other individual. Externally caused behavior is what we imagine the situation forced the individual to do. If an employee is late for work, you might attribute that to his overnight partying and subsequent oversleeping. This is an internal attribution, but if you attribute his lateness to the traffic signal, you are making an external attribution. External attribution don't become like of subject to matter here. Hi, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Now let's discuss. Now, now let's discuss The three determining factors distinctiveness refer to whether an individual display different behavior in a different situation. As the employee who arrived late today, also one who regularly blows off. Other kinds of a commitment, other types of a commitment. What we want to note is whether this behavior is unusual. If it is, we are likely to give it an external attribution. If it is not, we will probably judge the behavior to be internal. If everyone who faces our similarly situations responds in the same way, we can see the behavior show consciousness. The behavior of our tardy employee meets it this uh, uh, saturation if all employee who took the who took route we also lead from the attribution perspective. If consciousness is a high, you would probably give an external attribution. Attribution theory: observation, interpretation, attribution of causes, individual behavior, distinctiveness, consciousness, consistency, high and low, external and internal, high and low, external and internal, high and low, external and internal. Career objectives. I am often late to work. Some things always come up at the last minute. But my boss is a much a jerk. My boss is a much a jerk about it. He is threatening to install a time clock. This is so insulting. I am in management. I am a professional. I am on salary. I do the work. Please tell me how to talk some sense into him. Ankita. Dear Ankita, this issue seems to be very frustrating to you, and we had like to help you estimate that justifications. Let's start by the analyzing why you and your boss think or differently on the issue. You and he certainly perceive the situation differently. He see your lateness as a violation, and you see it as a natural occurrence. In many other jobs, precise timing may not be expected, valued, or needed. Perhaps your boss is trying to highlight the value he places on the punctuality, or maybe he sees you lateness as a unethical behavior that cheats your organization of the valuable work time. According to Anne Tan Sponsel, director of the Institute of Ethical Business Worldwide, the way we look at our decision changing our perception of our behavior. You view your tardiness as something that just happens, not a part of a decisions process. What if you looked at your tardiness as a daily ethical decisions? Your organization has a start time to which you agreed as a condition of your employment, so some coming in late is a deviation from a standard. There are action you can take throughout your early morning that control your arrival time. So by this model, your behavior is unethical. Your situation is not uncommon. We all have a moral blind spots or situations with the ethical ramification we don't see. Also, as we said earlier, the other organization may not care about your arrival time, so it's not always an ethical situation. But for the situation we ethics are in play, research indicates punishments doesn't work. Reframing the decision so we see the ethical implications does work. Tries these steps to gain insights. Look It the motivates for your decisions during your mother routines. Can you see where you make choice? Consider your past action. When you think back about your early morning decision, do you find yourself justifying your delay? Justification signals that your decisions might be suspect. Look at the facts. How do the reason for your past delays reflect attitudes you have unconsciously act on? If you can see the ethical aspect of your lateness, you can work to meet the expectations. Think briefly about the ethics of your morning choice when you first woke up, and you will be much more likely to be on time. Source: based on C. Mori and A. E. tribunals. Just think about it: cognitive complexity and the moral choice, organizational behavior, and human design process in 123 number 2 2014 13849. Tribunals ethics systems www.ethics-system.org/context/ and tribunals extends 7 May 2015 review and broadcast of a blind spot, so why we fail to do what's right and what to do about it. May 4 2015 activities. Common shortcuts in judging offers. Common shortcuts in judging offers. Shortcuts for judging other often allow us to make accurate perception. Ideally, ideally, and provide valid data for making predictions. However, they can and do sometimes result in the significant deterioration. Selective perception: any characteristics that makes a person's in other objective or an the event stand out will increase the probability we will perceive it. Why? Because it is impossible for us to assimilate everything we see. We can take in only certain stimuli. Thus you are stimulates everything we see. We can take in only a certain stimuli. May the prevalence of the things selective perception. Because we can't observe everything going on around us, we use selective perception, but we don't choose randomly. We make selections based on our interest, background, experience, attitude, seeing what we want to see. We sometimes draw uncertain conclusion from the ambiguous situation. Hello and horn effects. Halo and horn effects. It's a very important horn effect which is studied in the OD, organizational behavior. Hi, please like this channel and subscribe also. Please. Halo and horn effect. When we draw a positive impression about an individual based on the signal characteristics such as intelligence, sociability, or appearance, a halo effect is operating. The horn effect, on the other hand, is when we draw a negative impression for a single characteristics, and these effects are And these effects are easy to demonstrate. If you think someone was say sociable when else would you infer, you probably would not say the person was an introvert. Right, you might assume the person was a loud, happy, or written when in fact the word sociable does not include those other positive attributes. Managers need to be carefully not to draw interference from the small causes. A contrast effect, an age among entertainers never follow an act that has kids or the animals in it. Why audience love children and animals so much that you will look bad in the comparison. These examples demonstrate how the contrast effect can distort perception. We don't evaluate a person in the isolation. Our reactions is influenced by other people we have recently countered. For example, research on the 22 teams in the Chinese hospitality organization that we undergoing radical organizational change and new leader appointments suggests that the transformational leadership see chapter 13 is a more effective in the improving support for the changes among stereotyping. When we judge someone based on the perception of a group to which he when we judge people when we judge our perception of groups to which we deal with our complex worlds are manageable member of a stimuli by the using stereotype or shortcuts called heuristics to make decisions quickly. For example, it does make sense to assume that a liaison from finance will be able to help you figure out a forecasting problem, helping you figure out the challenge occurs when we generalize insecurity or too much. Stereotype can be deeply integrated and powerful enough to influence life and death decisions. One study that controlled for a wide array of factors such as aggravating or mitigating circumstances showed that the degree to which black defendants is a murder trials looked stereotypically black, essentially double their odds of presuming a death sentence is convicted. Another study found that the students tended to assign higher score for leadership potentials and effectively leadership to whites than to minorities, supporting the stereotype of rights as a better leadership. One problem with the stereotype is that they are widespread generalizations, although they may not contain a shared or the truth when applied to the particular persons or situations. We must monitor ourselves to make sure we don't unfairly applying our stereotyping in our evaluation and decision. Stereotype are an example of a warming. The more useful, the more danger from the misuse. It it should be obvious by now that our perception may of which are near mm, instances specific application of a shortcut in the organization. People in organizations are always judging each other. Managers must appraise their employee performance. We evaluate how much effort or co-worker are puts doing into their jobs. Team member immediately size up a new persons in many cases. Employment interview. Few people are hired without an interview. but some interviews make perceptual judgments and are often inaccurate and draw early impressions that quickly become entrenched. Research show that we form impressions of other within a tenth of a second based on the fourth or figure glance of most interviewers. Decisions change very little after the first 4 or 5 minutes of the interview. Thus, information elicited early in the interview carries greater weight than does information elicited other, and a good applicants is a probable. Characters characterized more by the absence of a favorable characteristics, performance expectations. All stereotypes of are negative. Learning definition of a learning. What is a learning? A psychologist's definition is a considerable broader than the layperson's view that it's it's what we did when we went to school. In actually, each of us is continuously going to the school. Learning occurs all the time. Therefore, a generally accepted definition of a learning is anything relatively with the permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. Ironically, we ironically we can say that a change in the behavior indicates that learning has taken place. What learning is a change in the behavior. The previous definition suggests that we can see changes taken place, but we can't see the learning itself. The concept is theoretical and hence not directly observable. You have seen people in your process of a learning. You have seen people of the process of a learning. You have seen. Oh wait, I'm coming back. Common biases and errors in decision making. Decision making engage in bounded rationality, but they also follow systematic biases and errors to creep into their judgments. To minimize effort and avoid trade offs, people tend to rely too heavily on experience, impulses, gut feelings, and convenient rules of a thumb. Shortcuts can distort rationality. The followings are the most common biases in decision making. Exhibits 5 6 provide some suggestions for avoiding these biases and errors. Overconfidence biases. We tend to be overconfident about our abilities and other abilities of others. Also, we are actually not aware of these biases. For example, when people say they are 90% confident about the range, a certain number might take their estimated ranges contains the correct answer only about 50% of the time, and experts are no more accurate in setting up confidence intervals than other novices. Reducing biases and errors. Focus on goals. Look for information that reconfirmation you believe. Don't try to create meaning out of a random events. Increase your option. Influence on decision making. Individual differences are organizational constraints. Personality. Research suggests that personality influence our decisions. Let's look at constitutions and self-estimates. Special fact is facets, special facets of a consciousness, particularly achievement striving, dutifulness, may affect calculations and the commitment. First, achievements oriented people had to fail, so they escalated their commitments hoping to forestall failure. Dusty fool Dusty fools